GoForThe2.com in with the Week 14 college football predictions. It's conference championships and Big 12 games that have bowl implications. Let's jump right into it. Friday night, MAC championship, Western Michigan and Ohio. A very intriguing game taking place in Ford Field in Michigan. Western Michigan did win last week at home over Toledo, dominating that matchup by 20 points. PJ Fleck and the crew dominating on both the offense and defensive sides of the ball. Zach Terrell, Corey Davis broke out, and the defense really held Kareem Hunt and Terry Swanson in check, forcing them to methodically work down the field. They now move on to face a blue-collar team in the Ohio Bobcats that are coming off a gutty home victory over Akron, who is looking to become bowl eligible. You look at Ohio overall, has played very well this year on the road, a 4-2 record on the road or on a neutral field site. This defense overall only allowing 105 rushing yards on the ground, but since October 1st has held opposing offenses to 92 yards rushing per game. They're also +5 in turnover margin, but more importantly, can run the football consistently, averaging 186 yards on the ground. It'll be a pro-Western Michigan crowd, but I think the coaching advantage does go to the Ohio Bobcats and head coach Frank Solich, who has his teams ready each and every bowl season. I like Ohio to push Western Michigan to the limit here. I think it's a very blue-collar type of game. I look for Ohio to run the football effectively, try to get Western Michigan into a low-scoring, ugly type of ball game, and take it into the fourth quarter. I think in the end, though, Western Michigan does get a 7-point victory in this battle, but I think it's very close, and I don't think it's as high scoring as a lot of people think. I think it's in the area of 34-27. Western Michigan gets the victory over Ohio, but Ohio is in this game from start to finish because of their ability to run the football and play defense. Look for Ohio to push Western Michigan to the limit. In the end, the Broncos do get a 7-point victory in Ford Field Friday night. Pac-12 championship, Washington and Colorado. Washington coming off a dominating 45-17 victory in Pullman over arch rival Washington State. They forced Luke Falk into mistakes, and more importantly, force that high-octane offense to methodically work down the field. I think that's the key to the victory in this ball game. When you look at the Colorado game, Colorado's very solid. They want to run the football. They're averaging 201 rushing yards on the ground. They're +10 in turnover margin and play very well third down defense, holding opposing offenses to 30% third down conversions. But they're going up against a defense which is the most opportunistic in college football, +18 in turnover margin in the Washington Huskies. Washington holding opposing offenses to 31% on third downs. They can create sacks as well, with 34 sacks on the year. And more importantly, you look at their quarterback, Jake Browning. He is very precise and very accurate and has stepped up on the road this year. You look at that victory in Pullman, he was very precise, and Washington has playmakers on the outside like wide receiver John Ross that can stretch that Colorado secondary vertically. I think that's the difference in this ball game, coupled with the fact that Chris Peterson is a big game head coach. You could look back to his days in Boise State bowl games. He stepped up in those big-time games. I look for the Huskies to dominate this game from start to finish. I think it might be a 10-point game much of the way, but in the end, the Huskies do prevail for a 17-point victory in Levi Stadium, and they move on to a possible playoff appearance with a solid victory over Colorado. Washington wins this ball game by 17 points, and they move on to a possible playoff appearance. You look at the AAC championship game, Navy and Temple. Navy coming off a dominating road victory over SMU. They put up 75 points on the Mustangs defense. They roll into this ball game with the momentum overall. but they're going to be playing a very blue-collar team in Temple that played in this ball game last year. They played in the AAC championship game on the road in Houston against Greg Ward and the Houston Cougars and lost that battle. I look for Matt Rule and the offense and defensive staffs to be ready and sort of change the game plan. Whatever they did wrong last year, look for Temple to change things up on the road in Annapolis this coming weekend. But more importantly, you're looking at a Temple team overall that is very solid this year. They're 3-2 on the road. They've played teams like Penn State very close, losing that ball game in Happy Valley by 7 points. They're very solid in run support. They're only giving up 127 rushing yards on the ground. They're +3 in turnover margin. And more importantly, can run the football consistently with running back Jahad Thomas, averaging 191 rushing yards per game against opposing defensive front sevens. Here's the other thing, too. When you look at their schedule, they face 2 teams that played triple option football. Week number 1, they faced Army and lost that ball game 28-13. Later in the year, they faced a triple option attack in Tulane and dominated that matchup 31-0. They have 2 games now where they face the triple option from a defensive perspective. They have solid defensive tackles that can disrupt the timing of Navy's triple option attack. And more importantly, they have a mobile quarterback in Philip Walker that could put some pressure on Navy's defensive front seven, much the way Greg Ward did last year. Navy struggles with mobile quarterbacks and, more importantly, struggles with physical offensive lines. You look at that matchup earlier in the year against South Florida on the road. They allowed over 400 yards rushing to Quentin Flowers and Marlon Mack. To me, I think that's the difference. I think Temple is a much better defensive team than Navy, and they have offensive playmakers. I look for Temple to win this ball game, and I think they dominate in the fourth quarter. Look for Temple to be in this ball game from start to finish. In the end, the Owls get a gutty 33-20 victory over Navy. Navy also has Army on deck with their rivalry game. Even though they're military kids, are they looking ahead to that matchup with Army, even though this is a championship game? I like Temple in this ball game. I like their playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. And in my opinion, Temple does get a 13-point victory on the road in Annapolis this coming Saturday. Big 12 matchup, TCU and Kansas State. Kansas State coming off a methodical victory over in-state arch rival Kansas. They won that ball game convincingly. Kansas played well in the fourth quarter, but Kansas State dominated for much of the way. They now go on the road to face a TCU team that dominated Texas on the road in Austin. In every facet of the game, they contained Shane Buechele. They contained Dante Foreman in the rushing attack, forced Texas into field goals, did not give up touchdowns. They now come back home to face another methodical team in Kansas State. I think this is a bad matchup overall for the Wildcats. Don't like Kansas State going up against speed offenses, especially on the road here. I know they played well against Zach Smith and Baylor 3 weeks ago, but this is a different animal in TCU. They're better coached, in my opinion, with their head coach, Gary Patterson. They have a mobile quarterback, Kenny Hill. He's probable for this battle. Kyle Hicks, their running back, is as well, but I don't think it matters. They have playmakers on the outside, and I like TCU's defense. Still not sold on Jesse Ertz. I'm sorry. This is an offense that's very blue-collar, methodical, does not convert in third-down conversions, and if they fall behind to high-octane offenses, they are in trouble. TCU averaging 291 passing yards per game. I look for the Horned Frogs to dominate this game from start to finish, and I do think that even though TCU has not played well this year, they dominate this matchup convincingly. Look for a convincing home victory by TCU, 40-20 over Kansas State in this ballgame. We'll stay in the Big 12. West Virginia coming off a dominating road victory over upstart Iowa State. They dominated that matchup by double digits and ran away with that ball game. They now come back home to face a high-octane offense in a team in Baylor that has gotten blown out now in 5 straight games. They're coming off a blowout neutral field site loss to Patrick Mahomes and Texas Tech. They now go on the road to Morgantown. I think this game, though, is a lot closer than people think. I know West Virginia is the better team. I know Baylor hasn't played well. They've lost 5 straight games. But I do feel that Zach Smith has progressed. He has a couple of games under his belt. And I do think that Baylor has the type of offense that can put pressure on West Virginia's defensive secondary. To me, I think that's the matchup you have to keep an eye out on. Baylor's averaging 275 passing yards per game. I think they could be in this ball game from start to finish. In the end, West Virginia does pick up a 7-point victory, but I think it's high scoring. 44-37, West Virginia beats Baylor, but it is very, very close. Look for the Baylor Bears to be in this game from start to finish. Another intriguing battle is the ACC championship game, Clemson and Virginia Tech. Clemson coming off a dominating in-state rivalry game against South Carolina. They dominated that ball game from start to finish, ran away with it in the first half with a 35-0 halftime lead. They moved on to a dominating victory over South Carolina. They now face a gutty Virginia Tech team that dominated in-state rival Virginia in Plattsburgh, won that ball game 56-10. Now they go on to the ACC championship game. Clemson played in this game last year. They dominated for much of the way before North Carolina made it close. They didn't get the onside kick, but Clemson is still looking at the playoff. Are they a little tight entering this ball game? I look at Virginia Tech from a defensive perspective. Think they could be in this ball game. They've played very well on the road this year. They're 4-2 road record. They've knocked off teams like North Carolina. They've knocked off Duke and Notre Dame on the road, and they knocked off Pitt on the road. So they've stepped up in big games on the road. They did lose to Syracuse in the Carrier Dome, but this team has played very well defensively in ball games, only giving up 146 rushing yards per game, and their secondaries played very well, only giving up 186 passing yards to opposing quarterbacks. You look at their third down defense as well, holding opposing offenses to 26% on third down conversions. I look for Bud Foster to have a solid game plan in place against Deshaun Watson. And more importantly, I look at Virginia Tech's offense. They have a quarterback in Gerard Evans. They have playmakers like Cam Phillips, Isaiah Ford, and tight end Bucky Hodges that can create mismatches and put some pressure on Clemson's defense vertically. I like Virginia Tech to be in this ball game from start to finish. I really think that they push Clemson to the limit. In the end, the Tigers do win a 34-30 victory over the Hokies in this ballgame, but I think it is a lot closer than people think. Virginia Tech pushes Clemson to the limit, but Clemson does prevail by 4 points, 34-30 over the Hokies this coming weekend in Charlotte. You look at another Big Ten matchup. It's Big Ten championship game, Wisconsin and Penn State. What can you say about both of these teams? They just continue to win and get better as the season progresses. You look at Wisconsin, they trailed that matchup at home against Minnesota in Camp Randall, 17-10. Alex Hornibrook got hurt for that battle. Bart Houston came on, led the second half comeback. They dominated in the fourth quarter and won that matchup 31-17 over Minnesota, and now have won 6 straight over the Golden Gophers and keep the Paul Bunyan axe. They now move on to the Big Ten championship game where they're playing a gutty blue-collar team in Penn State. Saquon Barkley was nicked up in that victory against Michigan State. Trace McSorley did step up. This defense by Penn State has been very opportunistic this year. +5 in turnover margin, and more importantly, holding opposing offenses to 36% third down conversions. Trace McSorley is a mobile quarterback. Think he could put some pressure on Wisconsin's defensive front seven, much the way J.T. Barrett did. Look for Trace McSorley to utilize the read option, especially if Saquon Barkley is not 100%. And more importantly, I like James Franklin in a big spot. I know they didn't step up earlier in the year on the road in Ann Arbor, but this team has responded. And if you look at James Franklin over his coaching tenure at Vanderbilt, in bowl games, his team stepped up and have played very well on the road or on neutral field sites. I think Penn State gets the outright victory here. I think it's a low-scoring game. In the end, the Nittany Lions shock Wisconsin 20-14 in the Big Ten championship game and possibly crash the college football playoff. We'll see how it plays out. Stay with me each and every Saturday on SB Nation Radio. That's SBNationRadio.com. Listen live every Saturday, 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern Time, or Fantasy Sports Radio Network. That's FNTSY.com/radio. I love talking about college football. Stay with me each and every Saturday. College football is the best.